right, we are back live with a Friday edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm the host of today's show, and I am joined by Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein, who we call Fish. Fish, welcome.
Welcome. I appreciate you having us on again. So.
Yeah, man. Did you enjoy your long weekend?
Yes, it was nice. Anytime you could get a little break, especially after a long spring, even though it's like a 2-3 week period, just dealing with these coaches in the spring football for high school, the games are not on specific days like a Thursday and Friday, like the regular season. You all have a game on a Monday or a Wednesday or a Thursday. It's just so random. So it was nice to get that over with and now start the whole camp season.
Yeah, well, before we got a lot to talk about. It's going to be you mentioned a busy May, and it was a busy May. A lot of recruiting going on for Florida State and other colleges. You were out and about South Florida. Did you discover any prospects this spring that Florida State might be interested in?
Oh, there are definitely guys out there that they're going to get on, and there's a kid at Dr. Crop who's a corner that we discussed in one of our sleeper type prospects that they are going to probably at least bring to camp. So spring is always where you find these new kids, and you know how it is. A lot of times guys come out for football their senior year, or it's just random guys just pop up. I had a chance to see the Jaden Parrish kid who committed early to Florida State, and everybody was kind of down on him, and he led their team in tackles. I think he had 13, 14 tackles. He was an impressive looking kid this spring. I think the Bryce Fitzgerald kid from Miami Belen is a kid that Florida State's going to probably end up offering at some point. He's a 2025, but the kid that really stood out this spring, Cal El Pascal, he's a defensive back from Dr. Crop. A lot of Power 5 SEC schools started to recruit him this spring. He had a great rivals camp. So I think between the two things happening, I think he's a name that if guys start to fly off the board for Florida State that maybe they missed on, this is a kid that could go to their camp and possibly get an offer.
Yeah, well, I got a question about the Parrish kid. A lot of people were concerned because he wasn't ranked or rated or any of those things that people get caught up in. What did you think of him in person? There wasn't a ton of highlights from last year in his huddle, but what did you think about him once you saw him in person?
Yeah. I mean, just very active around the ball, looked like he had good instincts. And that's the one thing, a lot of these linebackers, we've talked about this before, they don't play a traditional linebacker position anymore. They play off the edge as a rush edge guy, or you'll see him line over the slot. He was playing right in the middle of the defense, and he was reading what was coming at him. He played very well, made a lot of I think he made 3 consecutive plays in a row behind the line of scrimmage. One, I think, was a sack, then a tackle for loss, 2 tackle for losses. So he was very active, and they played 2 different teams. So it's not like the teams got to key on him. You got to see him against 2 totally different teams because they played half a jamboree against one team, half for another, and he dominated basically in a spring environment. Yes, they don't run a ton of plays or this or that. But what you saw was a guy that could run downhill, tackle guys behind the line of scrimmage, wasn't lost in coverage. You always get worried with linebackers getting lost in coverage and struggling in pass coverage. He stood out. I think his ranking, he's a guy that could possibly push for a 4-star at some point because he's going to be one of the top linebackers in Florida this year.
All right. Well, listen, speaking of top linebackers, Florida State's got 6 official visitors in for this weekend. They should be arriving, starting their official visit here in the next hour or so. And obviously, Osceola will have coverage of Florida State's official visit this weekend. And a good host of prospects, Fish. They're going to have 4 official visit weekends in June. They're going to have at least 8 camp dates. That does not include the June 5th mega camp that they're going to be working down in South Florida at FAU on Monday, which you will be at. They're going to have some midweek visits, official visits, and unofficial visits. Listen, the calendar does not slow down. I read an article yesterday where someone asked Nick Saban how many weekends they work, or how many weeks they worked 7 days a week last calendar year, and it was 44 out of 52. And this recruiting calendar, this camp calendar, seems to get busier and busier every year. But Florida State does have expected to bring in 6 kids today. Running back Christian Clark, linebacker Edwin Spillman, safety Wardell Mack, athlete Jaquavius Marshall, safety Rodarius Morgan, and offensive tackle Nair Daniels. So it's going to be a big weekend. They're going to follow that by getting down to Fort Lauderdale on Monday and going through what FAU is calling an elite camp. But let's start a little bit with what's going on with official visits this weekend. We got some breaking news on Christian Clark last night. He had taken an official visit. Christian Clark is the running back from Mountain Point, Arizona. He's announced the top 6 a while back. Went on a visit to USC 2 weeks ago. Came out last night with his final 5, which are FSU, Oregon, Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. As I said, he is obviously taken USC off his list. He will visit Oregon, Texas, and UGA later this month after his official visit to Florida State. Fish, we've talked a lot about Christian. Actually, he's one of the prospects that you and I both agree on. If you could figure out a way to get him, you've pulled off a pretty you'd have a dynamic duo at running back for the 2024 class when you put him with the commitment alongside the commitment of Cam Davis from Albany. Just let's talk a little. Both of us think Christian's a impact player. He's a good fit for Mike Norvell's offense with his ability to catch the ball in the backfield, which you see on his highlights. Just talk a little bit about Christian and how much maybe getting USC out of the picture. That's one West Coast school. He's only considering one other school that would be considered a West Coast school, which is Oregon. Just talk a little bit about how you think that enhances Florida State's chances.
Yeah, I think it gives them a great chance because USC is just such a premier program, especially on the West Coast. Now that they have Lincoln Riley, and that program, once they start rolling, they're basically the only program a lot of those kids west of the Mississippi care about. It stands for itself. But the one thing that's exciting about Christian Clark and also the other running back that they're bringing in this year is that if you land these guys, you've seen what Mike Norvell's been able to do with, good players. I know a lot of people the FSU fans and stuff think these guys are great players, and they're good players. Trey Benson's a very good player, but they're not that next level players. The Dalvin Cook types, those type of guys that basically, when you make a play call, they could change a game on one play, and that's what Christian Clark, the other running back that they're bringing in as well. The 2 of them are special elite level backs, and that's the exciting part. What will they be able to do in a Mike Norvell offense that's already shown they can run with walk-ons? And it's not a knock against those guys, but it just shows you that the scheme and what they run, what the capability of this offense could be like if they truly do have those difference makers at the running back position, which Christian Clark and the other running back in the class bring to the table.
Yeah, listen, and they've been able to produce a run game. Now, last year was their best offensive line since Mike has been here. But the first 2 years, they cobbled together some pretty good numbers running the ball, despite really being in the hole from an offensive line standpoint, from a talent standpoint. Just didn't have it. And, of course, we're expecting this offensive line and the offensive lines preceding this one to just continue to get better and better. But listen, we both like Christian. Florida State, if you're a new listener or viewer to Seminole Sidelines or even to the Osceola itself, you can go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check us out. But we mentioned this before, both in written articles and on this show. He is the nephew of Kenny Felder, who played quarterback at FSU in the late 80s, early 90s, and also was a baseball player. And his mother is a graduate of Florida State University, and she actually worked in the recruiting office as what they used to call a garnet and gold girl back in the mid-90s. So, he does have some ties here. So you got to like the fact that USC is factored out, and that's the closest school to his home in Phoenix that he was considering. He has not gotten those official visits up to Alabama that we know about, but you got to feel pretty good about Florida State's chances there. He did have a good time in his unofficial visit this spring when he came in. I don't believe it was for Legacy Weekend. I want to say it was the weekend before that. But anyway, Christian Clark looks like Florida State's in a good spot with him, and hopefully they'll be in a better spot 48 hours from now. Fish, just in your as we get into official visits, just kind of explain to people what a successful official visit would be from Florida State's perspective.
Oh, if the kid definitely comes out of the visit and commits, I think would be considered a great, hit there. But I just think you want to distinguish yourself as a program on the visit and eliminate some of those other schools. If you could get it down to just a pair, even if he comes out of this visit and really Florida State's in the top 2 or 3 instead of top 5, you'll feel a lot better. I just think we've talked about this. This is about there's relationships built there before, as far as you talking about his uncle playing at Florida State, the mother going to Florida State. There's a lot of momentum with that. That makes me feel comfortable saying that I think Florida State, if they don't land them this weekend, I think they're definitely going to be one of those top 2 programs. So that gives them a shot, and that's all you ask for. Like I said over and over, this would be a big-time get. Him and Cam Davis, by the way, I keep saying the other running back, but Cam Davis and him, they bring a different dynamic. One's a bigger, more powerful back. Christian's more a versatile. He's got a little more finesse to his game. He could run with power, but that finesse is there, and be able to cut on either foot and make a defender miss in the open field and then take it the distance. What they both bring would be special. And I think a successful visit is coming out of this weekend. As this kid says, you know what, they're one of my top 1-2 programs coming out of this visit.
Yeah, and Michael, you're right. It's the first of many exciting days in June. It's going to be a very busy June. We appreciate you listening, Donald, too. Bob may need you, Donald. He is down at the Moore Center trying to get some time with these recruits as they're coming in, and at least put some eyeballs on them and get some pictures for you guys. And we'll obviously have interviews on Sunday. Fish, they're, one of the positions at Florida State is, I don't know if I'll call it lagging. I don't know if lagging behind the term I want to use, but Florida State currently has no offensive lineman committed to the 2024 class. Both you and I believe that they will also use the portal to address the offensive line at the end of the season. But they are bringing in Nair Daniels, a massive, massive human being. Nair is the number 50th ranked offensive tackle. He's from Bergen Catholic High School, New Jersey. He made an unofficial visit to Florida State earlier this spring and will take officials to Miami and Texas after his official to Florida State later this month. He's 6'8", about 3, depending on what source you're using, 330 to 360. Watched this film again yesterday. He kind of grows on you the more you watch him, Fish, but and I know you've watched him. Just a massive kid. Still, in my opinion, growing into his body. Will probably get stronger, faster, better feet as he grows into his body. It's hard to grow into 6'8" at 17 years old. But just give us your thoughts on Nair as a player.
Yeah, I just think Florida State, when they play a Clemson, they play an LSU, they played a Florida last year, even Oklahoma, they look a lot across the line of scrimmage at the O-line and D-line, and they realize how much bigger these programs are. And the only way to get bigger, it's easier to sit there and say, hey, we could develop this guy. But there's not a whole lot of development that happens anymore, mainly because of the portal. You don't have that luxury of taking a guy and developing them for 2 or 3 years. We saw that with Rod Orr and Lloyd Willis, that they got them to a point where they probably could have played, but they already had over-recruited those guys. So Nair's a big physical guy. What they see in the SEC, what they see at these other programs like Clemson and stuff, he's a guy that physically already looks the part of a guy that could come in and at least contribute right away. Once you get him in a college weight program, you're talking a massive human being. He looks big now. Wait till he gets in that weight program and gets to develop. Nair is that type of guy that can help you get to that next level. He's a big physical guy. Bergen Catholic's a great program. Florida State hasn't had a lot of luck out of that program over the years. So getting a kid out of a program like that, which has had a lot of talent going all the way back to Brian Cushing. They've had guys that have come out there. Usually those kids stay up north. So being able to get that kid out of the Northeast, get him on out of Florida State. You saw the last time they went into New Jersey, they landed a Josue Matias. This kid's a bigger, more physical Jose Matias. So he started as a freshman on a national championship team. This is the type of kid that could come in and play right away. I just think it'd be a big addition to Florida State. They need tackles. We've discussed this. They got plenty of guards. You can look. They want those bigger, more long, athletic-looking guys that all these other schools have.
Now, when you say you think Nair could come in and play right away, do you mean as a true freshman?
No, I'm saying by like his redshirt freshman year,
Okay.
if he redshirts. I'm just saying earlier than your traditional guy that used to come in and sit for 2 or 3 years. I think he has the chance to get some playing time his freshman year, maybe get into 3 or 4 games, not use that freshman year eligibility up, but to get into 3 or 4 games. So by his true sophomore year, he can contribute, maybe even start if you needed him to in that second season.
Yeah, I see him more as a guy that's going to take a couple of years to develop. I think he'd be a redshirt sophomore before he'd be ready to go roll. He's got some work to do. He's not a finished product by any stretch of the imagination. And my other question to you on him was he's definitely further ahead in run blocking than he is pass blocking. Is he a guy that can play tackle at the major college? Do you feel like he can –
yeah, I definitely
improve his lateral movement enough to be an effective pass blocker?
I mean, you brought something up that he's better at run blocking. I'd rather have a guy better at run blocking. I think pass blocking is something you can teach. Run blocking is an ability that a guy has. Getting off the ball, hitting a defender, driving them back. It's an attitude with run blocking. A lot of guys, you see them high school, they struggle when they get to college to run block because everything they're doing is going and everybody runs a spread, and they don't really run the ball downhill anymore. So him having that ability to come off, fire off the ball, get on a defender, drive them back, and you can run the ball behind them. I like that. I think the pass protection stuff, you could teach him technique. You could teach him footwork. This kid can get to a Florida State. Maybe he's not a traditional left tackle, but he could play a right tackle position and be very effective for you on the outside.
Yeah, I think I think he'll be a kid that'll be if they do end up signing him, it'll be fun to watch because he is just a massive kid that moves pretty good for his size. And like I said, I still think he will improve his ability to move both straight forward and laterally as he plays more football. But anyway, that was my one question on him. As I watch this film, can he make that transition in pass blocking, particularly as a left tackle or blindside tackle, depending on whether you got a right-handed or left-handed quarterback. But anyway, so it'll be. But he has been on FSU's. This is at least his second trip to Florida State. He is going to visit, as I said, Florida and Texas later this month. I believe he's been on Penn State's campus a couple of times. I know he's been on Rutgers. He's been to Georgia on unofficial visits as well. So we'll see how that plays out coming out of this official visit on the first weekend in June. The third visitor I want to talk about is another highly acclaimed kid. Wardell Mack, the number 5 ranked cornerback out of John Earhart, Louisiana High School, has made an unofficial visit to Florida State already this spring. He will also take official visits to Florida and Texas later this month. Boy, it's amazing how many kids Texas and Florida State are involved with and going after together. So anyway, Wardell Mack, we've talked about him before, Fish. He's a great-looking cornerback. You've mentioned that you think he's an elite-level prospect. Just talk us a little bit. And, of course, you're going to have to battle LSU there. Of course, he doesn't have an official visit to LSU. Of course, I think he's right around the corner from LSU's campus, so he may not use that official visit to LSU. Of course, now with unlimited official visits, it's probably not the case. But go ahead, Fish, and just talk a little bit about what you think about Wardell Mack.
Yeah, going back and watching his film, every time I watch it, I like him more and more. He's just your typical LSU, Alabama type corner, very physical, does not mind to come up and hit a running back out in the flat, come up and tackle a wide receiver. He can play, I believe, corner or safety. He could play pretty much anywhere in the secondary. You could play him at boundary or field corner. You could put him at strong or free safety. You could put him over the slot. I think he's one of those guys that can play anywhere in the secondary. He's a closer. Once he recognizes where he needs to go, that ability to literally start and stop and go forward it's an elite level. He's one of the best corners I've seen on film, and his ability to close, just be able to close on guys. He can make a mistake and make up for it because of his quickness and his speed and that being able to redirect and attack. He's one of those guys that anybody would want as a corner. This is a kid that's going to probably play on Sundays. Yeah,
I know you've got some connections in the state of Louisiana, Fish. How hard will it be to pull Wardell Mack out of the state of Louisiana?
It's. I mean, I don't want to say impossible because they do have Coach Johnson on their staff. You have those relationships there. But when LSU wants a player in that state, they're going to land 90 to 95% of those guys. You got to just hope this is one of the 5% that you could pull. I'm of the belief that Louisiana, there's so many great athletes, and LSU can't get everyone. So if you could focus on one guy, and this is a guy that I would focus on in that state, Wardell Mack would be the one guy, because I think the reward is worth it. You're going to get a 3-year starter that's going to end up leaving early to the NFL, but you'll have those 3 years of him starting. I'm not going to say he's going to start from day one, but he's a guy that will start somewhere in year one and be a starter for the next 3 years before he decides to declare for the NFL draft.
Listen, if they were to get him, you put him with Quindarius Jones and some of these other young cornerback prospects Florida State have. You'll solidify that back end of that defense pretty quickly. All right, let's go to the couple of we're going to finish with Edwin Spillman, the linebacker. We're going to move to a couple of, I guess the term would be lesser-known prospects. Jaquavius Marshall, he's an unranked, at least by rivals, prospect from Macon, Georgia, Westside High School. Has made an unofficial visit to Florida State, made that unofficial visit in April, was offered by Florida State in May, will also take an official visit to Georgia Tech later this month. Since Florida State is offered, he's picked up offers from Iowa State, Pitt, and Kentucky, and some others. But listen, he's kind of a unique guy, Fish. He's 6'5", about 190 pounds, plays wide receiver and cornerback in high school, and I'm not sure that he's either at Florida State. Mainly, it's a numbers game at receiver at Florida State. They've already got 4 kids committed at wide receiver. They're probably looking at several others. We know you mentioned Trader and your stock up, stock down report before. Jeremiah Smith, who looks like he's locked in at Ohio State based on what I'm reading over the course of the last week, although he's at Florida this weekend from what I'm being told. And then, look, you don't see a lot of 6'5" corners. Watching his film, which there's, again, not a ton of, what are your thoughts on Jaquavius? He doesn't look like he can grow into a linebacker. What were your thoughts after watching him?
Yeah, I don't think he's a wide receiver, especially with the guys they're recruiting. He just didn't look like he had that great burst of explosiveness. He's basically a big possession receiver, and they are already recruiting guys better than him. I think they'll recruit above this kid. There's nothing that really stood out to me that said elite or even potentially elite with him. I could understand that he's 6'5". I don't see it. I think he's a nice player. I think his upside is a Terrence Parks type player that played at Florida State that could contribute, come in, maybe start a little bit and be a good backup piece for them, a depth piece. I didn't see any elite athletic ability. I didn't see when he was on defense, I didn't see the elite ability to close. So the whole question with him, I'd have to see him physically in person to sit there and say, oh, this kid could play linebacker, because he is 6'5". But you know how that is. If he has a basketball frame and he's 6'5", he's never going to get a whole lot bigger. Maybe he's 200 pounds. Then all of a sudden you're just recruiting over him. He's a guy that we would definitely have to see in person at their camp to really see. Right now I see this kid was more of a group of 5, low-end power 5 kid. I just think Florida State could do better.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in person either today or Sunday. I'm going to try to get down there if we finish up here soon enough. If not, we're going to try to grab all these kids on Sunday to talk about their official visits as they're leaving town. But, yeah, I was the same way. I want to see, does he have the width in the shoulders to add substantial weight? Because I agree with you. I'm not sure that he's a corner. I don't think he's a receiver with who Florida State has. And to be honest with you, the note I had as I watched his film was he really has to come. I'm not sure how physical he is at this point in his career. I had questions on whether you could move him closer to the ball or to safety position, and would he be physical enough? Time will tell. He's still a young player, but those were the questions I had. Is what is he at Florida State? Is he a corner? I'm not sure, and I don't know that he's physical enough to be a safety, but he has length and runs very well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the next 6 months as we get ready for National Signing Day, early December. The other guy that we haven't heard a lot about, and a kid another unranked prospect, at least from a rival standpoint, but Radarius Red Morgan from Phoenix City, Alabama Central High School will take official visits to Auburn, Cincinnati, and Miami later this month. He was initially scheduled to go to Michigan State this weekend. Florida State ended up getting the official visit for this weekend. But listen, Fish, I don't know if you got a chance to watch his film, but you really like his film. He's physical. He runs extremely well. The question I have on him, looks more like he plays more like a safety, but he's built more like a corner. He's 6 foot, 175 pounds. If the information we have in the system is accurate, but certainly a kid that runs. Chases the ball well, takes good angles for the most part, plays extremely hard, and plays physical. What were your thoughts on right there?
Yeah, you just basically stole my whole sheet of my notes because I was going to say everything that you're. I love the kid. I'm not going to lie.
I did too.
The total opposite of the last prospect that we just discussed, and I'm not trying to knock the other kid. This kid is on a different end of the spectrum. This is a football player.
Yep.
I don't care what his size is. He runs, and everything is he plays at a super active or super quick pace. Everything is fast. It almost seems like he's playing at a different speed and level than everybody else on the football field. I like the way he attacks. He's downhill. He hits. If he sees a screen pass, he's getting underneath that wide receiver before he ever gets their hands on him, and he tackles the guys behind the line of scrimmage. What Florida State likes out of their secondary, and this is the type of kid that I feel fits in. If he's not ranked, then whoever is doing the rankings, we got to talk to them because he deserves at least a high 4-star ranking. I haven't seen the kid in person, but from film, he's one of the better players I've seen on film as far as a safety. I think he's another kid that has high upside. I wrote closes very well, plays with a ton of energy, physical, good coverage, plays with good leverage. He doesn't let guys get inside him. When he's jumping routes, you always see him inside the wide receiver, and he's in position. It's almost like he's in the other team's huddle, and he knows what guys are doing. You could tell a very high football IQ, and these are the guys that you want in your football program.
Yeah, he had very good instincts. He comes to balance really well when he goes in to make a tackle. I saw very few times where he left his feet when he was trying to make a tackle. Yeah, so listen, I was very impressed. I watched this film last night and said, you know what, I want to watch it again this morning, make sure I saw what I saw, because I thought he was really, really good on that highlight tape. And listen, I have to be honest with you, Fish, I haven't heard much about this kid. I don't know if you have. Now, listen, we know he's right there in Auburn's backyard. He is going to Auburn on an official visit. But it'll be very interesting. And when we talk about size and these safeties, I have to remind myself sometimes that one of the best safeties of them in the last 20 years in professional football was Bob Sanders with the Colts. And Bob Sanders was all of 5'8", and just a tremendous player. And I don't know if this kid's has got the thick body type that Bob Sanders has, but he certainly has some instincts and the ability to make plays.
You've been in this a long time. Sometimes the numbers don't fit every player. Some guys are just very good football players. Matt Elam was one of those guys that was a 5'10" type player, and they don't fit the mold of what everybody expects a safety to be or a certain position. He's just a great football player, and I think that you need more of those guys. Not every guy needs to be a numbers guy that fits what you're looking for. Yeah, maybe he's a little shade under 6 feet, but he makes up for it because he's instinctual. He understands the game. He plays faster than maybe even his 40 time. Maybe he's not a 4.4 guy, but he plays 4.4 because he knows what the offense is going to do before the snap of the ball. So mentally, he's ahead of a lot of the guys that maybe are ranked ahead of him.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Rodarius. I really liked his film. Be interesting to see what he says coming out of this visit. And I would love to get find out what they weigh and measure him at. But you're right. Listen, we both know a prospect that's probably not being recruited because he's about a half inch too short. And, he's getting better and better offers every day. But You're right. Sometimes you got to disregard those. Everybody wants a prototypical kid, but they're hard to find. And listen, it is kind of funny that we get into all these measurements and all those things. At least it hasn't gotten to NFL standards where people get knocked for their hand size. At least we're just talking about height and weight at the college level still. All right, so Fish, a guy that we're both intrigued by, and probably maybe from where Florida State is in a depth standpoint right now at linebacker, a kid that's vitally important to his recruitment is Edwin Spillman from Nashville Lipscomb Academy, where he played for Trent Dilfer, who's the new head coach at UAB, and actually he does have a Final Six that UAB is in, but I think that was more of a favor to his coach because the other that name does not match with his other 5 schools, which are Florida State, Ohio State, Georgia, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. He is set to take official visits to Ohio State, Tennessee, and Georgia later this month after his official visit this weekend to Florida State. I have watched his film. Really good player. At a real critical need. What are your thoughts on Edwin?
Well, the one thing I always go back to what I heard Urban once say when he was recruiting players, are these guys on championship caliber teams or teams that make runs deep in the playoffs? I looked, he's been on a back-to-back state championship team, so that crosses that off on the Urban Meyer checkbox as far as prospects, had over 100 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. So you can tell he makes a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. There's a lot to like. He's a big kid, bigger, runs well. There are things he needs to work on. He's a little hesitant at times when you watch the film. He has some false steps that he takes where he's not quite sure whether he should be going forward or back. He could get caught up in a play. So I think if teams run play action or they run some misdirection, he could have some issues in that. But that's all stuff that he can learn at the next level. I think he's a kid that has a lot of upside. And he is at a position of need. So Florida State it'd be a very good addition. They need linebackers. I think there's almost I don't want to say they're getting to a sense of urgency at that position, but it's a position I think they definitely need to bring in more bodies and better players than what they have now. I think they're okay. We know what Tatum is. He's a very good player. I think Deloach is a very good player, but we have no idea what any of the other guys behind them really can do in a game if they ever had to play. And that's of concern. You don't want to ever be in a position where one of those two or both of them are out for any period of time because you're basically going with unknowns at that point. So Florida State needs to retool that linebacker spot. They brought in a couple pieces the last year, but they really need to get more guys like this if they want to play not only for ACC championships, but national championships as well.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, Fish, there's some breaking news. Adam Friedman, who is with Rivals, just sent me a message that a guy that you talked about in your stock up, stock down report or whatever we were talking about earlier, I can't remember what article it was, but he'd written several this week. Kamarian Franklin, the defensive end from Mississippi, has just announced that he is down to 5 schools, and Florida State is on that list. So you were dead on that, Fish. I was going to ask you that because we talked about him getting hard to get out of the state of Mississippi. He's only been on campus one time that I'm aware of, at least this year. But Kamarian Franklin, a defensive end from Lake Crow, I can't pronounce the name of the school, but
Cormorant.
He is down to Florida State, Ole Miss, Auburn, Tennessee, and Miami. So what do you think about that, Fish?
Wow, let's make a deal.
Well, no true words have ever been said.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to take a deal wherever he goes.
Yeah, I mean, if Ole Miss is in there, it's going to be a tough pull to getting especially a 5-star kid. Miami. I have been told that it really is a Miami Florida State battle for this kid. So that kind of with those 4 that you brought up, it kind of fits a narrative of what I've heard with them that. If he leaves the state of Mississippi, that Florida State and Miami, it's probably going to come down to those 2, and both schools need D tackles. We know one thing about Odell. He recruits very well, but it's every 3 to 4 years there's that one big-time kid he lands, whether it's an Eddie Goldman or Timmy Jernigan. He always pulls one of these guys out. It's that time. It's been a couple years since he's pulled a big-time D tackle. It's not a knock. He pulls out a lot of good guys and develops them, but I'm talking those next level D tackles. And listen, it's just hard to land these guys because everybody wants them and there's so few. I mean, that a 5-star D tackle, there's probably 3 in the whole country that are really to this level, 4 kids. And when you have a shot at one, and Florida State has a great shot at landing this kid, this is the type of kid you want to get. 6'6", 260 pounds. These are the guys that get you back to that next level, playing for those national championships. If you want to win up front, you need big, physical, athletic, NFL potential type linemen, and this kid fits the bill.
Yeah, that's great news for Florida State, because he is as you said, he's I don't know if there's I don't think there's anybody, as Kirby Smart said, I'm not sure there's any can't miss kids. Any kid can miss, but this kid certainly is a kid that you would be surprised if he's not an impact player at some point in his career. Another kid that has got Florida State in his Final 5, he was announced last night, is defensive tackle prospect L.J. McCray from Daytona Beach, Maryland. He has set up an official visit for Florida State for October 7th through 9th, which coincides with Florida State's home game against Virginia Tech. He is going to take 4 more official visits, but he's going to take them in June. He's going to take Florida, Miami, Auburn, and Georgia later this month. I believe he may be at Florida. He is at Florida this weekend. Obviously, he's been on Florida State's campus several times. He is the son of a football coach. I don't know how. I know that if it's a kid that Florida State wants really bad, if he's a priority kid, having that last official visit date is probably good. But what do you make of the fact that he is going to Florida, Auburn, Miami, and Georgia in June and holding out for Florida State until October?
Yeah, I thought Florida State had a very good shot early on. Florida State was the first one to get him on campus. They were really able to get him to lead Florida State's way. Mainland's never, outside of Buster Davis, has not been kind of Florida State as a school. This kid has other schools that for some gut feeling, and I'm not saying he won't end up at Florida State, I just don't get the gut feeling on this kid right now that Florida State is a true option. I think he'll visit. I think he'll give them the time of day. I definitely think, though, that he's trailing behind those other schools at this point. I think those other programs, whether it's Miami, Auburn, Florida, they have a better shot to pull him in right now. Now, you get him on campus. They've done a good job once they got on campus to sell their program. Georgia also being in the mix. I just think this is going to be a tough one for them to pull right now.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, they got a chance of getting him on campus. You and I always talk about that. I do think it helps Florida State. If he doesn't commit somewhere before October, even if he does and comes on the visit, at least gives Florida State a last opportunity to make an impression. And sometimes those last visits can be, you're the last person they see, you end up going to the dance with them. So we'll see. But LJ has been on campus. We know we've got a chance to watch him last year here in camp at the Seminole Showcase, which he had a very good day against some high caliber players that are already in college now. All right, so let's talk about or just signed scholarships for this past signing class. All right, so you did your stock up, stock down, Baker's dozen, and I got a couple of questions on that. Florida State currently does not have any offensive line commits out of high school. You've got Jordan Seaton as one of your top 12 kids to finish off this class. You also had Jason Zandamela in that top 12. And then you had Derek Plaz, Manasseh Atiti, and Jonathan Daniels and Nair Daniels just outside. With those 6 kids, if Florida State's going to take 3 of them, which 3 would you want to take?
Yeah, I think Jordan Seaton, just because he's a tackle. We can't stress this enough. Florida State has plenty of guards, and they don't seem to have a problem recruiting guards. It's a tackle position that's been kind of an Achilles heel for them. They've done a better job. I think Seaton and a TT would definitely help and help them there. Zandamela, I think, is in the class unless something just crazy happens. So I think you could almost pencil or even put pen in with him. I think that he'll be a June commitment at one of their camps at some point. We've talked about Jonathan Daniels. I really am interested to see how far they go with his recruitment. Physically, he doesn't have the measurables of a tackle. He's 6'2.5", close to 6'3". He does have long arms, but he's not a true tackle. He's more of a Isaiah Wynn. Maybe he ends up like the Rodney Hudson, where he's a tackle for a year and then basically moves inside to center guard at some point. I think some of the other guys, they're in a position of strength where they don't have to land anybody right this moment. I think they could be a little selective. They're not going to take probably more than 3 offensive linemen this year. You know how they are. They probably may even take 2 and just hit the portal after next season to bring in reinforcements. That it's worked well for them so far. I can see them doing the same thing. It would not shock me to see only 2, maybe even 3 guys in their class this year from the high school ranks at the offensive line position.
Yeah, I think we both agree. We're going to see more and more colleges go take some offensive linemen out of high school and some offensive linemen out of the portal. I don't think it'll ever be back with the advent of the portal. I don't think you'll ever see a full class of offensive linemen taken out of from the high school ranks. If we're going to sign 5, I think it'll be a combination of 2 versus 3 or 3 versus 2, 4 versus 1, depending on where you are as a program and really how quickly you've got to win. All right, so the other position, Fish, I wanted to ask you about, you've got a linebacker in Jaden Parrish. We know they're probably going to sign multiple linebackers, possibly up to 3. You don't know if the portal is going to factor into that between now and the middle of December or next January. But, you've got a guy listed at defensive end, Jamari Flagg, who I think is going to end up being a defensive tackle.
Yep.
But where's Florida State with its defensive end prospects right now? You said LJ, you felt like LJ was he wants to be an end. I think that's what he would start at if he signed with Florida State, but you don't feel good about LJ McCray. So where's Florida State with Dylan Stevenson and some of these other prospects?
Yeah, I think Dylan Stevenson, they're kind of in that Santa Melis phase with him that I think he commits sometime in June or July. He's a guy that's kind of like what they like now, long, athletic. He's probably in the 225, 220-pound range right now, but he'll be 250, 255 once he gets in the weight program. He's more physically developed than a Patrick Payton coming out of high school, but has some of the same kind of characteristics that he had. Probably not as raw. I think he's a little further ahead. Maybe not as much burst off the ball, but they're similar type players. But this kid's further ahead physically. I think going to Columbus is really going to help him because they stress that weight room, so he's not going to be as far behind, even as a Lamont Green's kid was physically coming in. So I think he's the guy that they're targeted as one of the guys at the end. You could see as many as another kid from high school, maybe 2 coming in at that defensive end spot. I think you'll see more momentum in their summer camps at the DN spot, and those numbers will start to solidify as far as who they're going to go after. I think that's where you're going to see what they're going to do really at the defensive end spot.
Yeah. Well, Fish, always appreciate your insight. It's always good to hear, and nobody has their ear to the ground better in the state of Florida than you do when it comes to Florida State recruiting, and I always love to talk to you about these things. Now, you're going to get busy next week. You're going to be down at FAU for FAU's Elite Camp, which Florida State's on-field staff will be a part of. Mike Norvell and the 10 on-the-field coaches will be in Fort Lauderdale to work with Tom Herman and his staff. They are calling it an elite camp, Fish. I guess Florida State kind of makes it elite, them being there. But is there any prospects that you know of that are going to be there that you're excited to see?
Yeah, I don't know who's going yet because I haven't even seen the list. But I'm pretty sure it's going to – with Florida State going, and I'm sure they'll have some other colleges there, you'll get a lot of local kids. I think it gives them an opportunity to get some of these guys to their camp up in Tallahassee, that they could see them a second time if they're not sure. These things are always great. I think these satellite camps where you can leave your zone, like Florida State being able to come down here, represent themselves well, and get these kids interested in Florida State and give them a chance to land them later down the road. A lot of these kids that they get probably come from these first interactions at these summer camps like this.
Yep. And then Florida State's staff, Mike Norvell and his staff, will turn right around, come back to Tallahassee on Wednesday, June 7th. They will host several high schools, probably dozens of high schools, really. I have not seen that list yet either, but they will have their first 7-on-7 / big man camp. They'll have 7-on-7 going on out at the reservation, or what I call the reservation, IM fields that are near the golf course. Then they will have the O-line, D-line camp in the indoor / Campbell. So we'll get a chance to see some kids on Wednesday. They will also double up on that camp. They'll do it twice. They'll come back on June 21st and do another 7-on-7 / big man camp. And then Fish, the two that you and I are looking forward to seeing are probably the quarterback camp, which Mike Norvell will have on Friday, June 9th. And then on Sunday, June 11th, there will be the mega camp. And I know you're going to be up here evaluating. I believe your son's going to be participating. So I can't wait to break down Can't wait to break down young Fishbein, see what you've taught him. But
hey, if he doesn't do well, I'll tell him he's trash, man. You know, I'm straight hard on my son. So,
and listen, that's going to be a crazy weekend. You got the quarterback camp on Friday. You've got official visits arriving Friday, leaving Sunday, and then I don't think there's but about 2 or 3 right now that I can track down anyway. But then you've got the mega camp on Sunday, the 11th. There'll be 2 sessions, a morning session and an afternoon session. There's going to be about, I believe the last time I heard, probably about 35 colleges here, coaches representing 35 kids, 35 different colleges. And we've seen some kids at these camps. We've seen kids get offered out of these camps by Florida State and others. What kind of numbers are you anticipating? They had I think over 1,000 2 summers ago. I was not here for mega camp this last June. But what are your expectations for the mega camp, particularly coming off a 10-win season? Will the numbers just be astronomical?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of kids and very, very hot. I'll tell you, that's my prediction.
Well, hey, listen, we're going to try to take a tent with us. Fish will be there, and I'll be there, and Bob and Kurt.
Just bring a hose.
We'll have the entire Osceola team will be at the mega camp to talk to these players and some of these high school coaches, and hopefully, Fish will be able to discover some prizes. You know, one of the things I love about these mega camps are finding an unknown, and I always hope that I hope that you or I can identify one of these kids.
Listen, they found a kid from Hudson High School last year. That's like, that doesn't happen too often. All right.
Yeah. Well, listen, just a couple of things, as the college football world turns, we'll end it with some just college football talk. The SEC spring meetings were this week. 2 things came out of that I thought were kind of interesting. One, Greg Sankey came out and said that the conference right now does not even have further expansion on its mind. It likes where it is at 16. Wants Texas and Oklahoma join the conference after for 2020, starting in 2024. How do you think that affects Florida State and the ACC? That statement, and we know it could change any minute, right? I mean, they could decide to go to 18 or 20. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but based on the way he said it. But what are your thoughts on that?
As far as a playoff you were talking about, or
no, the fact that the Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, came out and said that further expansion is not even anywhere on their plate right now.
Yeah, he said right now. He didn't say next week or the week after. So.
No, I'm saying it's fluid, but he said that as of the SEC's spring meetings, that they feel good about the 16 teams that they have.
Yeah, I mean, they should feel good. The conference has got a lot of good football teams, but as the Big Ten just added USC and UCLA, they add 1 or 2 more teams. They could basically say they're the top conference, and you know how that affects. All of a sudden, those same people aren't going to be real happy that they're the second best conference. The Big Ten is real close. You add a Florida State or a Miami to the Big Ten, or even a Clemson, all of a sudden they're on par, if not even better than SEC.
Well, Miami just got AAU status, so they're one step closer to being a Big Ten. They could potentially be a Big Ten program. Florida State's already got AAU status. But all right, so a couple other fascinating things that you had guys like Kirby Smart and Nick Saban and Lane Kiffin talking about everything from we got to get this. We got to get the NIL under control. We got to talk about unionizing, which would certainly and revenue sharing. And where do you think? I mean, I've always said that at the end of the day, I think where NIL is going is the players are going to end up getting a piece of the television revenue. And I don't know how they're going to do it. We'll wait and see. But where do you think all this is going with the NIL conversation with coaches, the experts in the industry, asking for Congress to step in to get every state on the same page when it comes to NIL legislation, because you can't, not even a conference can enforce it if it's a state, if it's a state law or not a state law, you can do what you want. But where do you think all this is going?
They're going to have to fix it, because you're going to have locker rooms eventually a mess. And I don't know if the coaches are going to be able to control it. I don't care how many people they have inside that locker room as far as coaches and off the field people. When you've got a starting center making nothing and a third string kid getting a big time deal because he was a big time player and he doesn't do jack for that football team, you're going to start having issues in that locker room. I don't care. You can tell me, it sounded like a great idea until all these things started to come in. There's a reason why, and you've already seen it at Florida State. Guys leave because somebody they brought in got more than they did, and it starts changing the dynamics of that locker room. Guys that you thought, these guys have bought in. They bought into the team thing. Money changes everything. And when you start to bring this much money in and somebody's starting and they're not getting paid while some third stringer's not, you're going to have to come to the table and realize that that kid that's starting wants a piece of the pie too. And there's nothing you could do about it, where you're going to end up, what happens? You lose an All-American center because the third string wide receiver is making more than them. That's where I think that these coaches like Saban, they realize like there's a fine line already trying to keep these locker rooms in check. And there's only so much you can do. I don't care how much of a disciplinarian you are and how good you are at keeping structure and all the other fluff words people like to use on the internet to describe these coaches. Money changes all of that. I think they're going to have some sort of revenue share in that locker room that, hey, maybe the kid gets 75% of the deal and the other 25% gets spread out among the rest of the players on that team. Even if it's a small amount, it keeps everybody happy. I just don't think you can have a small percentage making all the money and the rest of the players on the team, especially if some of those guys are contributors or starter, to continue to be able to save these programs. I think you're going to have guys leaving. Then you have guys from other teams trying to give big deals behind people's backs. You don't want that. You don't want that as a coach. You don't want to have to do it yourself. I think they've seen it with the transfer portal that a lot of their guys are getting picked off without them even entering the portal. They're already getting, recruited behind closed doors. And I think deep down, these coaches, they know that they need more control, and they needed somebody from the outside to help them control it because they can't do it themselves.
Yeah, listen, I think it's good. It's they got. We've always said this. They got to put some guardrails on it, but I think it does help that the power brokers in college football are asking for it. Your Nick Sabans, your Kirby Smarts. We didn't hear. I don't think we heard quite as much out of the ACC meetings about that as we did the SEC. But certainly, it's. I think that's something's got to happen. You got to have an equal playing field within each conference, let alone college football. And to your point, where you're talking about, even Kirby Smart said in his interview with Paul Feinbaum that there are things that, because of the new era of college football where you're paying players. Now, he said they still coach them the same, but there's some other things, and he didn't get into what they were. There were some other demands that maybe they did not place on the kids as quite as sternly as they used to. So it's a changing world. It's a very interesting time in college football. And, as I was talking to some buddies last night, who are not fans of the NIL and the transfer portal and all the things that are going on right now. Their concern is, will they feel the same about their favorite teams in college football in 5 to 6 years? Will they feel the same way, or will they feel more about their college football teams like they feel about pro football teams? So it's going to be interesting. But and we'll get into some other stuff later. But I know you got a lot going on, and I'm going to try to get down to campus and see some of these kids as they check in. But if you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to floridastate.rivals.com or theosceola.com and check us out. We've got some recruiting content that's in front of the paywall. I mean, it's free. We've got some coverage of softball that's free. We think you'll enjoy it. Fish has got his famous Fish Bits message board post, which gets thousands and thousands of follows and comments per post, and really informative. Obviously, we'll have the latest on softball. We'll have Sunday interviews with the official visit kids with Christian Clark, Ed Spillman, Wardell Mack, Jaquavius Marshall, Rodarius Morgan, and Nair Daniels. Hopefully, will talk to us as they're leaving campus on Sunday. We'll be down there with some of the other recruiting sites to see, get the latest on what's going on coming off those official visits. But Fish, thank you for your time today. We went a little bit longer than I thought, as we normally do when we start talking football. And look forward to seeing how this official visit weekend pans out for Florida State. And thanks for our listeners and viewers for joining us. And we will be back on Monday to talk a little recruiting and a little FSU World Series softball.
Sounds good.
All right, Fish. Have a good one.
Take it easy.